Welcome once again to Heart of a Shepherd. This is our second devotional for today. Now, the first was Song of Solomon, chapter 8. Now, this is from Proverbs chapter 1. It marks the beginning of our brief study of the Proverbs. Now, I've titled this devotional A Preamble to the Book of Proverbs. And so, if you would, this is a bonus devotional for today. I do want to pause and invite you to subscribe to heartofashepherd.com, and there you'll find daily devotionals throughout the book of Proverbs that I began writing in 2014 for our Hillsdale Church family. Well, we are coming today then to Proverbs chapter 1, and this is an introduction. The focus is the first 6 verses. Well, what is a preamble? It is a concise introductory statement to a book or document. And therefore, Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 6 is Solomon's preamble to his collection of Proverbs recorded here in Proverbs chapter 1. Now, actually, it will go all the way through to verse 7, which is the purpose statement for Proverbs. Now, Solomon's preamble, you'll notice, express a fivefold goal for conveying his insights and understanding to his son, who would be the future king of Israel. Now, if you do go to heartofashepherd.com, there you'll find my own amplification of word meanings in the scriptures. Well, let's consider then the 5 points of our introduction that's found in the preamble. The first is in verse 2, and it is to know wisdom. So, what is the first purpose, the first goal? To know wisdom. Now, what is wisdom? Well, wisdom is more than mere knowledge. You see, King Solomon desired that his son would be knowledgeable and have wisdom. And so wisdom implies the skillful use of knowledge. As we will observe in our Proverbs studies, a man or woman can be a genius, intellectually brilliant, and yet be foolish and lack wisdom. And then the second purpose in this collection of Proverbs is found again in verse 2, and that is to know instruction. Now, the word instruction, the implication of that is reproof, that is correction, or chastisement, that is discipline. And so the Hebrew word translated as instruction is also translated as chasten in Proverbs 13 and verse 24. And here we read, He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. And so in the Bible, the idea of instruction always implies to be disciplined or to be chastened. And so the application is this, that the primary purpose for a parent to chasten a child is instructive and not punitive or to punish. The third purpose of Solomon's Proverbs is found again in verse 2, and it is to perceive the words of understanding. Now, the word perceive is to discern. And so, an appropriate application of this goal is one of imparting what I will often describe in the book of Proverbs as common sense. In fact, my phrase that I have for the study of Proverbs is uncommon common sense, because we live in a world that true sense is indeed uncommon. And then again, the fourth purpose of Solomon writing the Proverbs, we find, and I'm going to quote, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice between, that is, discerning between right and wrong, and judgment and equity. And what is that? It is integrity. It is to determine what is right and fair. Again, you and I know we live in a world in which there's very little thought of justice, and indeed there is no fairness in this world. Why? Because there is no integrity among men and women in leadership. And so to acquire wisdom, what must you understand, verses 5 through 7, have a right heart attitude toward discipline and instruction. A rebel lacks that. One who rebels against the law and the commandments of God is not going to have wisdom. Now, sociologists and pragmatists might question who or what determines right or wrong. However, our Creator has weighed in on that debate with His law and commandments. We understand Romans 3 verse 20 says, by the law is the knowledge of sin. And so when we reject God's law and God's commandments, man is really left to himself and his own wit, his own opinions. And sadly, we live in a world I would describe often as self-determination. My opinion is equal to your opinion, some would say. Well, indeed it is not, for there's only one opinion that ultimately matters, and that is God's opinion. And He has already weighed in on His word with truth, law, and commandments, the principles and the precepts. And then notice, if you would, the fifth goal cited by Solomon for imparting his Proverbs was given in verse 4. Now here we read, verse 4, to give subtlety, that is again discernment, to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. Let me take a moment and break that down. Verse 4, to give subtlety, discernment to the simple. Now, who are the simple? The simple are the silly, the foolish. You know the natural bent of a man or a boy, a child, is silliness, foolishness. And so the Proverbs of Solomon were given to his son to train up a young man that would ultimately be king. And so it was very important that as a king, the young man would have discernment. Now, finishing up that verse, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. You see, it's not enough to have knowledge. There must be a discernment or a discretion regarding what is good and what is evil. Now, remember then, the primary object of Solomon's Proverbs was to prepare his son to be king. A king of ancient times was the supreme judge in all judicial matters, and there was no court of appeal after a king passed judgment. So Solomon's son, who would be king, needed to have the ability to discern between good and evil, to know what to say and what not to say, and to know when to be silent and when to speak. Well, closing thought for you. A wise man, or we would say a wise woman, will never stop listening or learning, verse 5. But in verse 7, we're told, fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so we're left with the question as we close today, are you foolish or wise? A wise man is always seeking to understand, to grow in knowledge and wisdom, having a discernment between that which is right, that which is wrong, that which is good, and that which is evil. But what does a fool seek? Nothing. He absolutely despises wisdom and instruction. What is instruction biblically? It is discipline that is for the purpose of training, not for punitive reasons, but to discipline a young man to exercise godly wisdom in choices. May you and I be numbered among the wise. Well, thank you for being a part of the first of several studies in the Proverbs that will follow. God bless you, and bye-bye.